Warp gate cuts down the training time by quite a bit. So as you can see, a sentry 37 seconds, 38 for a zealot. And after I warp in here, 30 seconds. So basically cuts, anything from about 5 to 10 seconds off production cycles then. So it's a good idea to get your warp gate done as quickly as possible. And besides that, just chrono boosting probes. Then when you do take your expansion, you can pretty much at least get it halfway saturated already. So we kind of missed a little bit of action here, but basically I was just microing my stalkers against some marines that are out on the map early in the game. If we go ahead and take a look at these Terran players here, yep, of course, stimmed bio. For the guy who expanded, he's not going to have a whole lot of gas early in the game, so it doesn't make sense for him to go tanks. While his partner actually went cloak banshee. And take a look here. Yep, there goes the banshee. Just doing a little bit of economic damage here. I'd say the turret was a little bit late. I'd say my observer is out in time, but wasn't quite using it as effectively as could have been, as I could have been in this case. So, personally, I prefer Templar tech and lots of gateways to go first against Terran, especially when you have a Terran partner, for instance, because he's going to have tanks and everything else, so his tanks are going to provide the splash damage you need. So, generally, I like upgraded gateway units. And also, since I saw that he was going Banshee, it makes sense to go Blink and just basically shut down any kind of Banshee harass early in the game and be as efficient as possible here. So, this other Terran player here is expanded as well. He's adding on a whole bunch of barracks, and he's basically going to be the one getting tanks the whole game. His partner is going to stick with pretty much exclusively bio and medevacs. And my partner is just going to be going Marine Tank because it makes sense to go Marine Tank when you're going against two Terrans. It's pretty mobile attack force. And I mean, Marines and tanks, as long as you micro them well, go pretty much counter any other Terran composition anyways. Alright, so not much happens here, so we'll just kind of fast forward a little bit. But in the meantime, I'd say I did lose control of that Zelnaga tower, but I took my own, and as I can see, yep, of course, it makes sense that they would try and push at some point in the game here. And one strong thing you can do is with Terran on this map is just set up outside of here, right along this ledge, basically harass them here. So my money's a little bit high here. I'd say really I should have been more warping in a whole bunch of charge lots in the meantime, but I was like, oh, I want to get Archons and Templar. Well, that was kind of a mistake. But my partner's economy has been pretty much shut down. He's stuck on one base for now, and he's just going to try and position his own tanks in the meantime to make sure that they can't advance any further. This player right here, Blue, he's sitting back a little bit far. He should really be kind of camping up here a little bit to make sure that he's protecting his ally from the other side. And Manor Mule basically living up to his name right now. So as you can see, Charge Lot Archon the Storm is really, really strong against Marine Tank. And a couple of storms here are going to be extremely efficient against this bio force. And once I'm done with them, just more Commander Archons. And as you can see, I've got my double forge and just been making sure that I keep ahead on upgrades. It's a pretty common strategy in Korea right now to be going like mass gateway, getting Templar tech, and getting double forge. And I think, in my opinion, it's probably one of the better choices to go against Terran, because for instance, if you go Colossus are going to be countered by Vikings, and then also they're going to win the air war, which means your partner's Vikings and siege tanks aren't going to be as effective. So that's more the reason I went Templar in this game than anything else. So at this point, we're a little bit safe, so we're going to go ahead and take another expand. And at this point in the game, we really want to try and get a little bit of map control back, taking these Zelnaga towers again. Position ourselves so that we can essentially defend this whole right side of the map here. And eventually we're going to want to get a little bit more map control. I'm going to have to spread some pylons out. and just to make sure they can't get too far ahead and expands and get real greedy in that way, because it is difficult to take down planetary fortresses. So at this point in the game, they're just kind of playing around with nukes a little bit. It's pretty much stagnant part in the game right here, so I'm going to go ahead and fast forward again until we get into a little bit more action. And I don't believe that they realized they had such a supply lead, otherwise it's pretty likely that they would have pushed at this point in the game. But part of that's just because my partner and I are not macroing the best here. Otherwise, the army supplies would probably be really. But one thing you can do to basically shut down a team that only has one Terran when you have two Terrans on your team is basically winning the air war. So it wouldn't have been a bad idea for their team, for instance, to make just a ton of Vikings, just to take complete control of the air, and then make sure that their tanks are effective and our tanks are pretty much ineffective most of the time. I mean, observers can, you know, still provide vision, but it's not uncommon for a double Terran team to be scanning frequently, or even spot the observer with a ghost and then so we just got some interesting fights going on here, and just throwing away units. Of course, there's not much else you can do when you're going against basically Templar and Colossus's Terran, and you don't have ghosts and tanks at your disposal. Oh no, the poor medevacs! Run! Oh. So in the meantime, my partner's taking another expand down here. Any expand that you take that's basically not immediately within the vicinity of your own base, you want to make a planetary if you can. I'm going to make a couple cannons here to try and defend this, but since I have a whole bunch of warp gates, I'd say I'm going to be able to defend myself against drops pretty efficiently, as long as I have one or two cannons to buy me some time for warp-ins. And I also kind of spread out pylons a little bit, not only to spot for other expansions, but to make sure that I have ways of kind of harassing their minerals and everything else. And once again, we're still kind of on the fight for the middle of the map here. And almost going to have 3-3. And after I did my Templar tech, I got double Robo Bay Colossus, because since they weren't going Vikings, it made sense to add a bunch of Colossus. But ghosts are kind of a clever way of dealing with tons of siege tanks, because it forces them to unsiege, and that is one way to advance. So they have a pretty large bioforce here, and pretty soon we're going to get into basically the last major fight of the game. In the meantime, they did try and expand down here, and even though I was max, I was able to warp in the Zealot and basically just kind of harass them. And whenever you're going into a concave like that, where you notice that my Zealots were way out in front, not a good idea to commit to that fight. I'd say you want to buy a little bit of time, because the last thing you need to do is get committed to a bad fight, because when you're going against maxed armies, if you're in a bad position and they have 100 supply that survives, chances are you're not going to get enough reinforcements back in time to defend. And even though my army supply isn't terribly far ahead of anybody else in this game, the Protoss army at this point in the game just gets continuously better as the game moves on, because Templar, since their storm the damage isn't reduced at all by armor, they're basically cost effective the entire game, assuming you can deal the whole time. Also the fact that Protoss can reinforce way quicker than anyone else. So you can see here I have a ton of warp gates, so I'm basically able to warp in, 10 plus units at a time. And Colossus are also extremely efficient against Terran armies. Even if they went mass Thor Viking or something like that, as long as you have storms, stalkers, and whatnot, I'd say Colossus pretty much wreck any Terran composition. And that's pretty much all you guys see from this game, but you can see at this point they finally decided to add in some Vikings. Probably a mistake that they didn't do it by this point, but as you'll notice, even with this fairly large army here, I'd say in normal circumstances they will be able to do a whole lot of damage, but just with all the reinforcements that the protoss can get, and then the efficiency of siege tanks as the game goes on, it's kind of counterattacking, it's just become less and less effective. And once again, Manor Mule and his partner are basically living up to their legacy of being very mannered. Alright guys, well thanks for checking out these double Terran games. I'm going to keep uploading more videos and kind of going over some of the other matchups. And I'm also eventually going to get into 3v3 and 4v4 a little bit, as well as kind of just going to go over the map pool a little bit and talk about what are the best maps for each race, so on and so forth. Alright, well thanks for tuning in, and I'll have more videos for you guys very soon.